Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Here we are in the second part of lecture 5, current issues and debates. The review of the literature above we have just done, it does help to demonstrate just how far debates and discourses on word Englishes have progressed since the late 1970s and early 1980s. What emerges from a study of the academic literature in the recent past is the picture of a changing discoursal map marked by a number of observable paradigm shifts. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, linguists such as Richard Platt, Pride, and Trudgill and Hanna were concerned primarily to discuss the features of New Englishes through a structuralist dialectological methodology combined with socio-linguistic commentary. An approach obviously linguistic in orientation, focusing on the description of linguistic features at the level of phonetics and phonology, morphology and grammar, and vocabulary. Its emphasis was chiefly on the linguistic description of variation, so it was a rather small step from the description of English accents and dialects to international English to English around the world. Similarly, Goral's work in this period also retained a core linguistic focus that stressed the centrality of linguistic description. During the 1980s, Kachru and Smith in North America sought to incorporate the study of word Englishes within a comprehensive global framework of analysis. This remained partly linguistic, partly the description of word Englishes in the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia, but Kachru's analysis went beyond this into a discussion of the socio-historical, socio-political, and ideological underpinnings of the discourses of word Englishes. His advocacy of a socially realistic approach to word English enabled him to construct such models of word Englishes as three circles of English, bilingual creativity, multi-canons, and power and politics, thus enabling what had been periphery English users to write back and rewrite the discourses of their Englishes in the academy. Starting with a specific description and analysis of one variety of New English, Indian English, that is Indian English, Kachru proceeded in 1980s to construct an inclusive theory of word Englishes involving a meta-sociolinguistic conceptualization of the whole field of study. The effects of this reconceptualization of word Englishes were felt across a range of language studies, including applied linguistics and English language teaching. Kachru's work related the spread of English to issues of multilingualism, language shift and language maintenance, language and nationalism, and language and race, and inspired scholars to begin dealing with the socio-political underpinnings of socio-linguistics. In recent years, Kachruvian theory has also influenced a cluster of studies of English as a lingua franca within the European context. A major milestone in the literature came with the publication of Philipson's Linguistic Imperialism in 1992. Whereas previously most writing in the field was broadly liberal in political orientation, Philipson's work presented a harder-edged Marxian challenge to extent theory and appealed to both dependency theory and a critic of capitalism. Philipson was further able to invoke the notion of linguistic human rights to support judgments about the negative consequences of English linguistic imperialism. So, he also appealed to liberal democratic concerns with human rights. Whatever the reason, Philipson's book has had a major impact in steering subsequent debates on the politics of English worldwide. At the center of Philipson's theoretical approach on linguistic imperialism are a series of arguments about the political relations between the core English-speaking countries and the periphery English countries. And the core English-speaking countries, all countries that we saw in the inner circle of Kachru model of spread of English, whose mother tongue is English, and in peripheral countries, English countries, so the rest of the two circles where English either is a second language, like in Nigeria, India and Singapore and Pakistan, or it's a foreign and international link language like in Scandinavia and Japan. The nature of this relationship, Philipson argues, is one of the structural and systematic inequality in which the political and economic hegemony of Western Anglophone powers is established or maintained over scores of developing nations, particularly those formerly colonies of European powers. The political and economic power of such nations in the third world is accompanied by English linguistic imperialism, whereby the dominance of English is asserted and maintained by the establishment and continuous constitution of structural and cultural inequalities between English and other languages. Finally, Philipson asks whether ELT can help create greater linguistic and social equality, and whether a critical ELT can help fight linguicism. Another important contribution to the debate in this context has been Pennycook. His detailed and well-researched The Cultural Politics of English as an International Language endorses Philipson's critique of the role of applied linguistics and ELT in helping to legitimate the contemporary capitalist order, and he upholds the view that Anglophone countries, Britain and America, have promoted English throughout the world for economic and political purposes, and have done so to protect and promote capitalist interests. So he agrees with this point of Philipson's, that Britain and America promoted English for their own benefit, to protect their own capitalist interests. The final chapter of the 1994 book calls for a radical pedagogy concerned with the creation of counter discourses, insurgent knowledges, common counter articulations, so that critical English language educators join the struggle for a critical, transformative, and listening critical pedagogy through English. Throughout his other writings, Pennycook has sought to advance and refine a critical perspective on both word Englishes and applied linguistics. In his book Critical Applied Linguistics, he explains that critical applied linguistics is more than just a critical dimension added on top of applied linguistics. It involves a constant skepticism, a constant questioning of the normative assumptions of applied linguistics, and presents a way of doing applied linguistics that seeks to connect it to questions of gender, class, sexuality, race, ethnicity, culture, identity, politics, ideology, and discourse. Both Phillipson and Pennycook have been influential in establishing the agenda for the critical discussion of word Englishes. Related work by other authors include Edgington and Wren, Holborough, Ricinto, Skuntab, Kangas, and Tollefson. The critical turn and word Englishes. Pennycook has turned his attention to what he considers the deficiencies of the word Englishes paradigm. So Pennycook turned his attentions to the deficiencies of word Englishes. A version of this critique is found in Pennycook in 2001, where in his discussion of frameworks for understanding the global role of English, Pennycook identifies the politics, problems, and pitfalls of the word Englishes approach as its perceived blindness to global forces, its alleged adherence to natural model of change, and its purported weak theorization of hybridity. Perhaps Pennycook's rhetorical turns are best explained, at some extent at least, by reference to the survey of approaches we saw in the approaches of word Englishes in the table earlier in the first part of our lecture. Here, three broad groupings suggest themselves. Approaches whose objectives are largely linguistic in orientation, for example, English studies and corpus linguistics. So they are largely linguistic in orientation. Second, approaches that share both linguistic and socio-political concerns. Here they have both linguistic and socio-political concerns. For example, most socio-linguistic approaches and the word Englishes approach. And those approaches that are primarily socio-political and political in orientation, for example, studies of linguistics, linguistic imperialism, and other critical approaches. In this context, Pennycook plums for a brand of critical linguistics with little linguistics. The rhetorical of Pennycook qua critical linguist not only shifts the object of study almost entirely from language data and linguistic analysis to that of activist pedagogical politics, but also relies heavily on the discourse of post-colonialism and postmodernism transferred to the social linguistic or applied linguistics arena. Thus, Pennycook, when explaining the details of his post-colonial performative approach to pedagogy, seems to consciously dabble in the post-colonialist unintelligibility mode of expression. A problematizing stance on schooling takes up questions of resistance and is skeptical about the notion that awareness can lead to emancipation. A post-critical pedagogy draws on a notion of an ethically engaged postmodernism that can help us move away from the sort of essentialism that has so clogged the arteries of applied linguistics with the clumsy insistence on gendered and cultural identities. In a recent paper, Pennycook again takes issues with word Englishes as he itemizes the descriptive adequacy of the three circles, the focus on national varieties of English, and an exclusionary tendency to shut out other Englishes. Pennycook also asserts that Kachru has made repeated and unfounded claims concerning the neutrality of English in post-colonial contexts. Pennycook further suggests that such political naivety is complemented by a dominant focus on codified varieties spoken by a small elite, so that the word English paradigm is far too exclusionary to be able to account for many uses of English around the world. The word English's paradigm is presented as politically naive, tied to a view of English as a neutral language, a view that wittingly or otherwise serves the ends of global capitalism. At the same time, the Kachruian paradigm is seen as bound by the constrictive circles with their many exclusions. While one may be taken with the creativity and verve of much of the discourse here, there is also a need to correct the balance. To address the points itemized above, the author is of the view that the Kachruian model of the three circles was never intended to be monolithic and unchanging, but was formulated in the 1980s as a potent rewrite of centrist orthodoxies of that time. The charge that Kachru's work is somehow concerned with recognizing only standardized varieties of Englishes is believed by many instances of Kachru's interests and publications. With reference to Indian English, for example, Kachru comments that there are as many Indian Englishes as there are languages of India. The criticism that Kachru has argued that English always and predominantly operates as a politically neutral language seems very ridiculous to those familiar with the broad range of Kachru's writings. Indeed, it seems deeply ironic that the word English's approach be judged as apolitical if one pauses to consider that one of the founding texts for discussion of both linguistic imperialism and the critical applied linguistics was Kachru's paper entitled The Power and Politics of English. This paper appeared some 6 years before Philipson's Linguistic Imperialism, and not only sought to apply insights from Foucault, but also rehearsed the discussion of the lingo side of minority languages. Later, studies by Kachru and others have developed such topics throughout other writings, very often in the form of articles published in the journal Word Englishes, which has also provided a forum for Philipson and others of critical persuasion on a regular basis. Finally, the charge that Word Englishes is exclusionary in orientation seems equally vacuous if we look at the record of the Word Englishes journal itself in recent years. Scrutiny of the articles appearing in the journal reveals that it consistently facilitates publishing on a wide range of topics reflecting many diverse interests. For example, in the decades 1990 to 2000, only a minority of Word English's papers dealt with area studies of Englishes, while many other articles covered topics such as discourse, context linguistics, critical linguistics, applied linguistics, bilingual creativity, the sociology of language, feature-based approaches, word English's theory, corpus linguistics, Pidgin and Creole studies, English studies, and lexicography. The journal has also provided a forum for a number of symposia and special issues dealing directly with critical issues. These include the Symposium on Power, Politics and English, the Symposium on Linguistic Imperialism, and Symposium on the Ebonics Debate and African American Language. In addition, there have been significant numbers of other articles from critical linguists in the regular issues of Word Englishes. What is true, however, is that Word Englishes gives space to much more than only the politics of language. It has provided a vital forum for articles, research and discussion from a very wide range of outer circle and expanding circle. Academics with special issues on societies such as Nigeria, Japan, Europe, Hong Kong, South Africa, China, South America, and the Philippines. In addition, as noted above, topics such as discourse analysis, context linguistics, applied linguistics, bilingual creativity, linguistic features, etc., have all received good coverage. What then, one wonders, is the crux of the criticism? Is that the Word English's approach is not political enough, that its politics are not radical enough, that its Catholic inclusivity weakens its political potential? If the nub of the Panico critic is indeed as appears, that the Word English's approach misses the big picture of the global spread of English and fails to deal with the complexity of current realities, one is moved to respond that at a number of levels, the Word English's approach is often more firmly grounded in reality than critical applied linguistics. In what words, after all, do we live and work? So most of those attending IAV, International Association of Word Englishes, conferences or contributing to our reading the Word Englishes journals are educators, scholars, teachers, researchers, and graduate students working in areas related to language education in a variety of educational settings. Okay, this is let's stop here for the second part, and we have one more part for this lecture. So thank you very much, and let's meet there in the third part of today's lecture.